Thank you guys all so much for being here. So, Morning Glory Club started in 2020. I had started participating in other grief groups for suicide loss survivors at the end ish of 2019. And when I went to my very first group meeting, I realized that that was exactly where I needed to be. I needed to be with other suicide loss survivors. And I had been in a previous relationship with a guy who had lost his brother 10 years before, and I thought we would do all this healing. But what I came to find was that he had actually not ever done any of the hard work. And so when I went to my first group meeting, it was just, felt like a wash of relief to find other people who are brave enough to share their story and do the work. And that's where I met Audra, who's my podcast partner on Two Girls, One Grief. And I asked her after the group meeting if she would be my friend, and she invited me to another group. And so I started going to like two, then like three groups every week. And it just became a very big part of my life. And I started collecting all of these like survivor friends. And at the beginning of 2020, my dad's birthday is January 26th. I decided to throw a birthday party for him with all my suicide loss survivor friends. And I made all these like community games, and we were right here in my living room. And I believe that's Frank that's on the call there. He was there. And I just realized that, oh my goodness, like I wanted to actually make a documentary about the benefits of group therapy because I was I was like, everybody needs to know about this. Like survivors don't know. Like I only just happened to find out because I called the suicide prevention center and then they connect me with the bereavement sector. Like I didn't even know that suicide loss survivor groups were a thing. And so when I started making this documentary, I made a made for TV group. And then we ended up getting shut down because of COVID. And then we transitioned onto Zoom. And now this same group has been going for now close to 6 years. And I never even thought that that's what it would end up being. And it's been probably the most amazing thing I think I've ever created in my entire life. And it would be nothing without all of the amazing survivors that show up here week after week to do the amazing work. Um, I wanted to speak on what Dr. Marlon was saying in terms of like feeling calmed. My dad was the person that made me feel calm. He was, the source of my calm nervous system. And so when that was like removed, it was really hard for a very long time. But through doing this work, I have found a new way to calm my nervous system. And it really made me grow up a lot in a way that in some ways I had wished at the time that I didn't have to, but now I'm actually very grateful for in some ways. We always end all of our group meetings with gratitudes. And I think that that's a really an amazing way to sort of honor our loved one because ultimately, and I think we can all agree, our loved one wouldn't want us to be in so much pain. Um, so fast forward to 3, maybe 4 years ago, I was invited to a dinner that Kevin Hines was hosting. He survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and Dr. Marlin was there, and everybody at that table shared their loss, and we became friends, and he started coming to group, and I was like, Dr. Marlin, you should just come to group and be a client, not necessarily like have to host with me. And then over time we ended up co-facilitating together because he has just so much to offer that we couldn't help the manifestation of that happening. um and I'll let him share this part, but apparently I'm very much like his sister Amber. So we're working on a podcast called Clinically Related, which is going to be the more clinical version of Two Girls, One Grief, where we'll be sharing more of the things that we're going to be sharing with you guys today.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you, Aleksei, too. I've asked people to share in, any heaviness you have today, even things that are lighthearted too. Feel free to, we create an emotional space for folks as well. And thank you for just being who you are. You get in this point of when your loved one has died, you have a lot of questions around why. And I lost my sister to suicide, and in 2013, I mentioned she was a nurse. I was working as a healthcare crisis worker at the time. Actually, I was running a psychiatric hospital back in Indiana. and I was the director of operations there. And my sister and I worked actually in the same emergency room for a period of time. She worked in the healthcare system. I used to visit her after my shift up on the healthcare unit that she was operating, and she went through some really tough stuff in her personal life and professional life, and made the tragic choice of ending her life. And with her daughter in the next room, who's my niece, who I have invited into Morning Glory too. She's also a loss survivor, her mother. So I bring the people that I love most into this group to provide support for them. It really compelled me after, as a therapist, if you will, as a provider in this space, to do more. And so I set out a journey to say I wanted to create changes within these healthcare systems because my sister was in an outpatient program. She had been to a psychiatric hospital, actually the one that I was directing at it for about a 10-day hold. But sadly, 6 months later, she ended her life. Um, and I started on a journey of working with the Zero Suicide Initiative. I sat on the steering committee for the 988 board, which was formerly the 1-800-273-TALK, because I wanted to do something more. The problem that I was running into, I was so much focused on fixing systems that I wasn't focusing on myself. And so, as much as I felt that that was a good coping mechanism, what I wasn't doing is I wasn't doing anything really to care for myself. And so I kind of was carrying for years, I say a heaviness and almost a distance. I had went through a relationship breakup, so I was keeping people at a distance. And but I met Kevin Hines at a conference, and we became very good friends. When he was speaking, I started doing a speaking, um, and I wanted to do something more purposeful. And I realized the more that I told the story about my sister as a nurse in the healthcare space, as a CEO of hospitals, I could now engage with people more. They wanted to create the change. There was a mission behind what I was doing. And I've now taken that, and I never forget the director. His name is Dr. John Draper. He said, your sister died by suicide. It's a gift. And I was angry about it. I was, what? I was like, what do you mean a gift? And I was like, how could this ever be a gift? And um, I realized that it had to do with how I responded to it. And I had to face it. I could not get away from the the concept of suicide based on the work that I was doing, because every day I was working with rehab centers and hospitals and nurses and so on. But I met Aleksei, as she mentioned, at a luncheon with Kevin Hines that he invited me to, which was pretty common. And she's sitting across the table, and I'm like, "Gosh, this girl, she looks familiar." And then all of a sudden, I was like, "I got it! Like this is the new embodiment of my sister." And she happened to be about the same age of when I lost my sister, and same height. She had the same dog that my sister had, a little Yorkie. I was like, this is wild. And so the more that I spent time with her, the more, and my sister and I always wanted to work together in the healthcare space. And so, it's become a common mission now working alongside Aleksei. So now I picked that mantle up. I recently got married. Aleksei was at my wedding. My wife is a suicide loss survivor. And so she's been to our Morning Glory Club group as well. So I've trusted this group to help create a stronger purpose. And as we've talked, we wanted to figure out, well, what more can we do? Because there's a lot of people who are on their own trying to figure this out. So that's been the call to action that we've had, and creating a shift in purpose, because you don't have to sit in your pain. And I did walks and I thought they were great, but I wanted more. I did therapy, but it was something about have a therapist who didn't understand what it was like to lose someone to suicide. They would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and da 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 da. I don't think they understood the traumatic elements of that, right? So, um, finding community again, finding a reconnection again, was the key for me to make this shift from. And if it wasn't for Morning Glory, I probably wouldn't have my fiance or and now wife. Uh,
Aw,
It was
that's
actually the conversation that we had around suicide loss and the loss of her mother that she shared in group that brought us closer together. And then her supporting my niece, right? Also, who's been to Morning Glory, who's met Aleksei, So it's really transitioned, and I've seen the power, and I've realized even though this tragic against thing happened with my sister, it did not end. And so I'm able to create platforms, publish 2 books, and do a whole lot more. And I said, we've got to share this with more people because you can expedite your healing and you can do more than maybe what you're doing today. And that's what we've learned with Morning Glory. And so creating that community. So anyways, that's my testimony about, why we have this synergy, why it's important. And so instead of asking all the questions of why, I started saying, well, what now? I started asking that question, what can I do now with this? And shifting out of the place of hurt into hope and transformation has been the key here. Um, and every time we add a new person to this community, it just shifts the energy further and further, and elevates the purpose behind this. And so that's what we're calling out, reaching to the community and saying, wait a minute, we don't have to sit in isolation behind these. When you create this community, all of a sudden you have this energy that you didn't know that you had. You have a new safe space, and all of a sudden your nervous system starts to strengthen. I've never felt this sense of love that I have for my wife, and love for myself and restoring that. So it's really thanks to Morning Glory and being able to make these shifts in emotionally, that I could not have done just by doing therapy. So it's the reconnection and vision. It was very interesting because I got married on National Suicide Loss Survivors Day. And Alexa
National,
it was wild.
Sibling loss day, which
Yeah.
was like so weird. I was sitting there when he was like about to walk up to the altar, and I look at a picture of his sister that was sitting like right next to where I was seated. And I pulled up my phone to like do a post of him like walking up to the altar, and it popped up on Instagram that it was sibling loss day, like National Sibling Loss Day. And I was like, oh my God, I felt like your sister was there. And then it was like right at 426, which was like the day, the month and year that my that the month and day that my father passed away. So it definitely felt like spirit was there. I don't know what you guys like believe in. I'm not a religious person, but I definitely am spiritual, and I feel like I get to see lots of beautiful signs like pretty often these days, which has been amazing. Um, to speak to what Dr. Marlon mentioned before, which is about the gift, I had heard that in one of my first survivor meetings, and I felt the same way. I was like, find the gift? What? How could there possibly be a gift in this mess? This is horrible. There's nothing worse. And the gifts have been, I honestly can't imagine my life without having gone through what I've gone through with my father now, which is shocking for me to be able to sit here and say. Um, and so finding the gift is part of our mission now. And in terms of lived experience and the difference between going to traditional therapy versus um, seeing a coach, for example, I liken it to a road trip. A therapist may sit in the passenger seat as you're driving along, and then you drive into a wall, and they'll say, well, how did you feel about that? And then you'll get back and you'll start driving somewhere, and you'll drive into another wall, and we're like, so really, how do you feel about that? Versus a coach who's going to tell you go left, go right, go straight. And then when you get to your destination, a coach will step out, and your companion, because we're also companions because of lived experience, will hold your hand and walk with you into the darkness. And in the darkness, we will cry with you. And then we will become your coach and ask you, like, can you let go of a piece of that today? And then together we get back into the car and we drive along some more. And then all of a sudden, a hand appears from the back seat and asks for the aux cord. And you turn around to find your group of other survivors. And then it's time to sing along and enjoy the rest of the drive because we truly are not alone. So that's what we've found here at Morning Glory Club.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, well, I want to ask the folks too, like, what's the worst thing that you maybe have heard from people asking you, about your lost loved one? Have they said to you things like, "Oh, why did they do that?" Or, what was wrong with them? What's the thing that has come up for you when people are asking about this grief um, and
That
the loss that you've had?
that is another horrible part about the complexity of this type of grief, is that it leaves us having to answer questions that are
Yeah,
probably unanswerable.
yeah. So if you heard people ask you the question, like, why? Yeah, suicide is a sin, and what did you do or didn't do? Right. Yeah, okay. Now that's good. Now I'm an ordained minister. So and so this was a big one when people talked about suicide and said, I'm from Indiana, very conservative, and having to eulogize. Yeah, everything happens for a reason. Oh my God. And you're like, "Oh, there's no reason for that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They're in a, wait, has anybody heard, like, are you in a better place? Some lady talked to her on Facebook, pick up something. She was cleaning out of her garage. The lady literally called me to tell me she saw that her happy, said she was she was happy in her place. I got to go back to it to tell me she was her happy self on Facebook that morning. Ooh, he's no longer in pain. Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Like, or they're in a better place. Right. Um, yeah, lots of painful stuff. Yeah, I struggled with the gift for sure. Um, yeah, yeah, and so trying to answer those questions too, right? Because if spiritually you have to believe, like, okay, well, they killed themselves, then oh my gosh, they're damning themselves to hell or whatever, right? And so those issues play, right? So it doesn't give you the comfort and the solace if you're a person of faith. Um, let's see what else. They're in a better place. Um, yeah, the best place is with me right here. Like what, like, yeah. And so you have a lot of unanswered questions about what is going on, and then people not knowing. How many of you have avoided it just altogether, just to avoid these questions? Say if that's happened to you, like, I don't even talk about it. Um, yeah, I lost my sister. Yeah. Like I used to, I used to when I was in high school. Yeah. Yeah. You just don't bring it up. Um, I actually my niece, yeah, I lost my mom right after the eighth grade. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, my niece recently lost the father of her child this year, and I've told people that. I've told a couple people this because it really brought up a lot more pain. And really sadly, he died by the same way. They have a daughter together too, so I feel like this is really impactful. But I've had people come to me and they say, "Oh, suicide runs in families." Right. And I'd be like, what? He didn't know my sister. We're like, what are you talking about? Like, they're not related. Like, what do you mean? So, and I don't know if that was supposed to be a comforting statement. So you have a lot of people saying a lot of stupid stuff to you. That's not comforting, right? And people don't know how to respond. And then that leaves us also as individuals, like, we don't know how to respond to this. How do I answer this? And it takes community to figure out, one, the shared experience of all of us having these stupid questions get asked to us, right? These terrible statements that are intended to be comforting, but they hurt more, right? They cause more pain. Um, they cause more shame. And to me, that's the part of that makes um, suicide risk go up, is the negative self-talk and the shame and the stigma and the self-blame. It's my fault. What did I miss? Right? That is trauma. The negative cognitions that you begin to take on, that you are not able to find solace outside of that. Um, how many of you been to you had a question, Alexi?
I was just gonna say, but
But
when we face our triggers and deal with them, we get to become bulletproof. I mean, I'm so upfront and so out loud on all of my social media, like everywhere I go. Like I I can't really not talk about it anymore.
Mhm.
I used to avoid telling guys like on first dates, and now it's like I better hurry up and tell them before they go on the internet and see who I am. And Now I feel really infallible in terms of being able to have any conversation with any person, as you know, ignorant as they might be, in terms of being able to ask the right questions or have those types of conversations, which most people don't really aren't educated about it. I've come to the point where I'm actually just enthusiastic that people are willing to engage with me about that conversation, and it gives me an opportunity to like educate them.
Hmm.
But it's taken me a lot of work to be able to get to the place where it's like nobody's going to trigger me about something about my dad, because
Hmm.
my dad and I are good. Like, I
Hmm.
also like to talk about the new relationship that I have with my father, which is pretty magical. Like I was kind of alluding to before, he shows up in all of these different spaces and facets. And one little tidbit of advice, if you will, that I love to tell people, that like if you could take the thing that you're really, really good at, the thing that you're magical at, and infuse the love of the person that you had into it in any type of way, and then share that with the world, it can be a really magical experience that makes everything sort of come full circle, because I really do think that that love never ever dies, and that that's where that pain comes from, but we can turn that pain into unconditional love for ourselves.
Hmm.
And that like the love story that is the grieving process, it really is the most beautiful love story that could ever be, because the love is of our own selves. And
Hmm.
I definitely love myself more now than I ever have in my entire life. And that's because I was able to turn that grief into self-love, self-compassion, self-adoration, and in a healthy way. And yeah, now I get to share that with other people. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I saw Taylor made a comment that the exposure therapy, it's like exposure therapy, right? Just to be able to tell your story, right? And to shake off the shame, to have courage enough to talk about it openly and to educate people. Um, Now, mind you, we have to educate ourselves, obviously, as well, right? And so that's also important to really understand and to make sure that we're not responsible for other people's judgments. We are responsible for our inner self-talk as well. So it becomes an opportunity to share that. Um, and so it helps create more balance within that nervous system. The more that we talk about it and the more that we share it. And um, so I'm grateful. And so I am so I'm triggered all the time that I talk to Aleksei half the time. So just because of who she looks like. Um, and I realized to learn how to embrace that and recognize like, oh, okay, well, this is something that is on a higher power that's being sent to me, to recognize this is another opportunity to face a pain, right? And make it more purposeful. Um, so
so
those are the things that we really align with.
Dr. Marlon mentioned shame.
Mhm.
Has anybody ever experienced like shame, or any of the other bad boys, like guilt or regret? The unanswerable question, why are you guys experiencing any, I'm just going to refer to them as sensations about the loss of your loved one, if you can share it in the chat, just so we have an idea of like what anybody is particularly dealing with today, so we can maybe give you guys some good tidbits.
Mm. Yeah, think about also the holidays coming up. I think we've got to, if those come up around the holidays, those big milestone anniversary, what feelings come up? What are you concerned about um, as you approach the Thanksgivings, the Christmases, or whatever other holidays that you celebrate, birthdays, um, the anniversary date of the death.
How losing him impacts my romantic relationships.
Yeah, big time.
Big time.
Okay.
I know all about that.
Definitely Shane came up when it first came up. Sometimes still, I will always be seen as the girl who lost her mother to suicide, and that my family is just going to be sad forever. I feel a need to control the narrative almost. Oof, that's
Mm.
powerful. Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks, Taylor. When I was first deciding on whether I was going to go public with my story about my dad, I had that same thought. I was like, oh my God, everybody's gonna be like, oh, that girl whose dad killed himself. Like, guess he didn't love her enough. And what I have found is that that story and my connection and my love and my relationship with my dad, now with being able to stand in my power with it, I feel like people almost kind of like respect me more. Like, wow, she's been through a lot and she's turned it into all these cool things. And she's clearly very, I don't really love the word strong. Um, just because I think it gives us a vibe of maybe wanting to be invulnerable, but being able to be so vulnerable and to wear my heart on my sleeve, I, on a daily basis,
Hmm.
is my truest, biggest, I think, power.
Hmm.
That and being able to turn darkness into light, which I know all of you guys are absolutely capable of doing because you're here.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for your comment too, Bridget. I see.
Oh,
Um,
Vanessa raised her hand.
you
Hi
want you
guys,
want.
I'm really bad at typing. So I just wanted to chime in really quickly. It's
By
been
the way, Vanessa is one of my besties.
Mhm.
And we met because we're survivors.
yeah, so no, I really it's been almost I think 18 years since my brother died, and I thought I did all the grief work, right? I was like, okay, I'm good, everything's that's over. And then you come to a point where it's like, I haven't thought about him in like a few months, and you start to feel like really guilty. And I think that's where I'm at right now. It's like, shit, like, did I forget about him? Like, oh
Mm,
fuck.
mm,
Like he's probably so mad at me. And I'm like, and then of course Lexi's in my life for a reason, probably. So then she's, very persistent and like Vanessa, I'm like, okay. I need this. But it's so easy to just I kind of stuff it down because I'm like, ugh, I know I have to constantly address this. Because if you don't keep doing the work, I think it's a long work. um,
mhm,
and it never goes away. I think the grief never goes away, but it's just how you navigate through it that gets you through it,
mhm.
you know? So that's all I have to say.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vanessa.
Vanessa.
No, really well said. It is absolutely a journey. And the notion is what's important is that you take it. Um, I want to acknowledge Bridget's comment to the guilt, the regret, the shame, embarrassment, seeing herself as the girl who found her mother dead, 6.5 months pregnant, anger. Okay. Yeah. So who's felt anger towards their person? I think we've got to be able to acknowledge that. So if you got anger towards the the person that killed the person you love the most, right? Let's call out anger. It's like, yeah, I felt angry. Right. Look what you did to me. Look what you did to your daughter. Look what you did to the family.
Your unborn
Yeah,
grandbaby.
your unborn grandchild. My goodness.
Bridget, I'm so sorry you've been through that.
Yeah. So, and to know that we are not at fault. I'm not at fault. And the and I think Mike put on here about we begin to question our relationships, right? One, there is, and we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between bad grief and good grief. Um, you know, the bad grief and also what it signals in the nervous system of like, okay, well, we don't want you to be close again, right? We question the love that we have. So you have a response of extremes where either this is an unusual event. So you're going to have these abnormal things happening within the body and within the mind. So you push people away because I don't want to be hurt again, right? You don't want anyone to get close to you again. So there's a distance and there's an isolation and there's a self. The problem is you move further and further away from the pain, having a way of avoidance. So you start to disconnect, right? The other
That's
thing
right.
is, or the opposite. Who overconnected? Yeah. The wall build is real. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, don't get too close kind of thing. The overconnect. Yeah. So there's an over dependence, right? So this is extreme reactions in our nervous system Right. So now we're giving too much denial. Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just a river in Egypt. Um, it's like, no, it's the immediate thing that happened. I remember when my sister died, that the family it was everything else because, my sister's beautiful and she's young and, why would she ever do anything like that? So it had to be something else. Right. Um, yeah. So remember, these reactions that come up for us is really, really important. I thank you all for sharing, um, how you responded to grief. So, Alexa, I'm gonna ask you too to kind of share, like, what did you notice in your healing? What would you say is the bad grief? Because it's happening. There's something that's dropped in our life that we didn't ask for, right? Um,
I am an ex-professional bad griever, so I can tell you all about it. Right when my dad died, my family lives in New York City, which is where I was born and raised. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, so I went straight to New York like that next morning after he passed. And I didn't want to be at home. Um, and I definitely wanted to be cuddled. I wanted to be like I think ideally I wanted to be in healthy masculine energy, but I was Tindering. And so, you get more
yeah,
than you
that's
bargain for sometimes.
so healthy on Tinder, right? All the healthy masculine energy is on Tinder, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that's where I'll go. But I didn't know that what I really wanted was to be held. My dad used to lay in bed with me at night when I was a kid and read me bedtime stories. But like, obviously, like I wasn't gonna get that on Tinder. But like, it was like I didn't know that that's what I was after. I
Mhm,
just was
mhm,
like, I'm gonna go on Tinder to find guys, and it was a great way to get out of the house. And it took me quite some time to realize that that's what I was actually doing. And
mhm,
that's also why doing the grief work is important, because you know your triggers and then you know what you're probably going to do, which for me, it was looking for strange and drinking. And
mhm,
my brother was in the process of opening a bar and restaurant in New York City. So open bar all the time. And I think I was pretty much blackout drunk for most of that whole time that I was in New York City. I mean, I actually have some videos of it, which I was planning on maybe editing together and just putting myself on blast just to show people like how ridiculous it was at that time. Because I just wanted to numb out and not feel my feelings. And then when I was sober, I was holding all of this space for my family and feeling like there wasn't really a space or a place for me to truly be able to express myself in like a healthy way. Um, my family's never been the best at being a soft place to land. My mother's from Trinidad, from the Caribbean, and they're, very loose and fun, and they love to talk about their emotions, but they don't really like touching. It's not versus the Irish and English side of my family where my dad was born, very stiff upper lip, don't talk about emotions at all, but very cuddly. And so
mhm.
from both sides, it was like there was either not enough emotional and not enough physical. And it was just like I was always kind of never really felt totally safe growing up. Although the safest place was always with my dad. And so I was like your consummate daddy's girl, like the daddy's girl of all daddy's girls. And
Mhm.
I have two brothers and a mother. And my boy, the boys are dad mama's boys, and I'm a daddy's girl. And so it was almost like a table with one leg missing. It was just I just didn't know where my place was. So yeah, I drank and I messed around and I stayed out of the house. And yeah, I actually broke out really badly too. Like I had like kind of adult acne, like I was a mess. But I also still was like working and getting things done and like handling all of this stuff. It was just a complete mess.
No, but I'm glad you said that last part too. Like, so if please drop your bad grief in the comments too. What did you do that was not healthy for you?
Yeah, don't leave me
Um,
out here hanging by
yeah,
myself.
yeah. So, when you said it gotten busy, I was really productive. So for me, I'd say my bad grief was not talking about it and specifically like overworking. Like because I was in a healthcare space, I felt like if somehow I could fix the mental health system, right? So it really drove me, which felt like productive, right? I was getting a lot of stuff done, but it was putting me on a path of like real burnout. And so I constantly worked, right? I had jobs that ran hospitals that were 24/7. And so I just poured into that. But what was happening, I was neglecting myself and along the way, but it gave me a distraction and it felt somewhat meaningful. But emotionally, I wasn't showing up in relationships. I didn't trust to really date and get closer to someone. So that became a barrier for me because I thought it was all about just fixing what I thought was a good mission, but I was also disconnecting spiritually and disconnecting emotionally when it came to relationships. It was just like, you can only get so close, right? Because I've got work to do. And so it felt like I was doing something, but I really wasn't paying attention to the inner work that needed to be redone and to rebuild right out of this. And so, and if something didn't go wrong, it didn't go right at work, it was really heavy on me. So, like, I worked in psychiatric hospitals. So, yes, people died and it was very heavy on me. And so I would just push harder and I would try to fix that system and I would fix that problem and I would fix that. So as an operator, I got really, really deep into that. So that was my bad grief, if you will. But that's what happens naturally in the nervous system too. Because again, remember this is a traumatic event. So what do? We go back into what we talked about, which is attachment, right? Or we move into the way to disconnect, which is more drug and alcohol use, right? So we don't want to feel our feelings and we want them to be quieted. So we seek out overindulgence in relationships or drinking too much, if you will, right? To try to fill that space or we distract ourselves with other things. Um,
I
yeah.
will say, those are some notes from somebody's on here who can't add it into the chat, so I copied and pasted it.
Mhm.
Once I started to feel better, I realized I didn't need to drink anymore or mess around. I've taken it a little too far now. I'm celibate and sober. I'd like to change that because, but I'm looking for like a real person, like my person. And thanks, Vanessa.
That's right. Celebrate that.
Yeah, let's celebrate that for sure. I went out on a date with somebody, a nice man over the weekend, and I shared with him that my dad took up so much space in my life that I think that it enabled me to date people that weren't really going to fully show up for me. And then after losing him, I continued kind of on that same pathway. And now after realizing and doing my work and getting more self-awareness, I realized that like I need a whole other partner who
Mhm.
truly is also loves themselves and has done their own work on themselves and can really show up as like a full equal partner. And
Mhm.
that's also why I've chosen to just hold out until like I'm in a truly unified connection before I, hook up again.
There you go. That's the best self-love. And so I love what Taylor said here. Vanessa said, Taylor's talking about saying yes to everything, right? A lot of community service, like the over goodwill, it's like that correction of the message in our mind that is unconscious of like, what did I miss? So now you do everything, right? To try to take care of everyone else, right? To be overly of service. And so there's an extreme and, that notion of like, well, I don't want, um, yeah, I don't want to set those boundaries up for myself, right? There's a lack of like I'm trying to overcorrect now for the loss. Um, there was something else that came up for me as well. Uh, gosh, that self-blame is really heavy though. That's such a concept. Let's see. Bridget says, I can't drink right now. Luckily, I'm feeling myself sink back into some OCD anxious people pleasing things I thought I'd healed from, and out of years of rest. Yeah, rest to go. Yeah, so absolutely. So we have to really be mindful of that, of recognizing that we go through these waves, right, of feelings, of blaming ourselves, trying to overcorrect. And I think yeah, Vanessa said boundaries. Um, of how to kind of rebuild your nervous system so that you can function in a healthy way and have more awareness. Um, yeah, I mean, who also heard from that was it on suicide loss when the idea that this person is so selfish, right? How have you heard, how many of you heard like, yeah, somebody said, oh, that's so selfish, right, about your loved one, right? And so what happens is then you also like, well, I want to be selfish. Right. So you start neglecting yourself, right? Which I also think is a terrible understanding about suicide. It's not, has nothing to do. It's a total perception. Yeah, yeah. She said, yeah, Taylor totally heard that. Oh, it's so selfish, It's like, well, my person believed that they were a burden. They fell for that narrative that somehow that it was better off for them to leave in some way, which is a tremendous lie. And
But
but
very common.
yeah, very common, but that's the judgment that people have um, around suicide. I think one of the basic teachings that we get into Morning Glory around this, and Aleksei is really good about this, is stopping people from saying committed suicide, right? It's like, don't say that, right? So
Because it means that we're saying the person committed a crime.
yeah, yeah, it's not
That's
a crime. It's not
hilarious.
a crime. Right. And so, yes, it's painful. Yes, but no, they died by suicide. They died with emotional pain and from that emotional pain. And a lot of times people were help seeking, but the stigma behind of it is what kept them in that dark, dark place. And so that's our goal, is to overturn that in
Yeah.
morning glory. It's just like, no, 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 no.
And that's what's so exciting. Because, like, every time we have these conversations, we are moving the needle towards ending the stigma associated with suicide loss survivorship. And that was one of my, what that was the impetus for me to want to make the documentary. Was I was in the world around people like that guy that I was dating before I entered into the survivor community, and then in those rooms where survivors felt safe and comfortable to have this conversation, so many of them were talking about the stigma and their experiences of feeling like they couldn't talk to anybody about it. And I'm like, but you guys are my superheroes. Like, how are you going to be shut down in the world? And then I was like, oh my God, we need like a spokesperson for this. We need more people like talking about this. And so then I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? Like, I need to educate myself about how to have the conversation. And being in group is by far and away the best place to learn how to have the conversation, because everybody's going to bring their stuff and we're all going to talk about different remedies and ways to heal and ways to combat people saying dumb stuff. And then when you go out in the world, it's like you've got your armor because we're
Mhm.
with you and you've been able to take all of this new beautiful information and take it out into the world with you.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
Well,
the
let's talk
training
more
ground.
about that. Yeah, let's talk more about that. Let's talk about the good grief, right? So what are the good things that we stumbled on? We want to expedite the good grief, right? And cycle out of the bad, which takes us to a more of a minimum potential where we're isolative, we're attached, we have like the wrong words, we're the wrong walls up, we're burning out. What have you done, Aleksei, for good grief? What has been the things that you have put in place to really enhance? And I'll ask people in the chat to drop in what has been really effective for you on the journey. So share some of the gems that you've had that's been good grief. Um,
Well, I mentioned taking what you're really good at. So for me, that's making art babies. That's what I call them. I call them all my little art babies. Morning Glory is obviously one of them. And then I wrote a half-hour dark comedy loosely based on my true story and raised the money for it. And then we shot the pilot. And for me, making comedy was always like what I loved to do. And, when I first started writing the show, I was like, how the hell am I going to make a comedy about this? Like, there's no way. And then we found a way. We found a way to mix comedy with suicide loss survivorship so that we can tell a story in an entertaining way. And so that was one project. Um, and then, making the podcast with Two Girls, One Grief, it kind of also, happened naturally, if you will. Like Audra and I, she lives in Venice too. We'd like go out and go to restaurants, and people would be like, "Oh, so how did you guys meet?" And people would ask us that like every single time we would go out. And Audra would tense up and get all weird. And I'd be like, "Hey, well, I've got a crazy story for you." And just opening up the floodgates of being like so open about who we were and how we met and why we were friends, would then create this environment where other people would start like sharing their stories. And I was like, oh, this is a great idea for a podcast. Um, and so making art has definitely been, and even the meditation that I played in the very beginning, which I recorded that yesterday, and those are real gongs. And so I'm like, how can I just take all of the things that I know how to do and then mix it with this sadness, but then also this joy, and then make it palatable for other people? And so I'm just wanting to get you guys to kind of think like, what are other ways that you can mix in this intense story that you have and bring it into what it is that you're good at, your special sauce,
Yeah.
Um, so aside from that, I've done electromagnetic brain pulsing. I've done EMDR. I did an ayahuasca retreat in Peru, which was an 8-day retreat, and I did ayahuasca 4 times. It was very intense. We did Washuma and climbed to one of the tops of the Andes Mountains. Did I went and did like what do they call that, where they steam out the tent? Uh,
Mhm.
I've done a lot of like very intense like excursions. I tried 5-MeO DMT. I've done psychedelics. I'm not really doing psychedelics so much anymore because I I'm not saying I'll never do them again. I'm just so protective of my brain health now. Um, Not because I'm necessarily like fearful that something bad could happen, but that being said, both of my parents have struggled with their mental health. And my mother now, and I do think theirs is as a result of not dealing with their trauma, which I've definitely gone the very opposite direction. But my mom had a lot of childhood trauma, and then the trauma of losing my dad. And now she has like Alzheimer's, and she has almost no short-term memory. And um, what's it's very challenging, but what's beautiful about it is having experienced losing my dad very suddenly and then getting the opportunity to kind of lose my mother slowly. They both have they both have shitty things about them. Do you know what I mean? It's like I have found the beauty and the joy in having a much longer duration of seeing my mother and knowing that eventually this might take her, but enjoying every moment that I get to have with her. And I had that same experience when sitting by my grandmother on her deathbed for the last 5 days of her life, and really reveling in the fact that I had every extra minute, which that experience would have been completely different had I not lost Jeremy, like basically overnight. Um, and it's interesting how having such a sudden, deep, horrible loss can be, and this is again going back to the gifts, a gift. Because I went to England, and what I wanted more than anything was to hear my grandma tell stories about my dad and to ask her, how did she feel about Jeremy taking his life? I never got to ask him any of that stuff. And I was like, all right, Aleksei, you've done this before. How are you going to accept that this is the situation that you're in? And how are you going to find the joy and the beauty in this 5 days that you have left with Pamela? And so I did that. And then I held all of this amazing space for my grandma. And then I got to be there with her for her very last breath. And that, I would say, is probably the most honorable thing that I think I've ever been able to do in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Yeah. Leaning into it, facing it, and thank you guys also for your comments too, the things that have been really good for you. Taylor, you shared about doing the walks. That community service has been a good thing. For me, the healthcare institutions have been really helpful, but specifically suicide trainings. And so I've been able to get into organizations either that I've ran or that I've consulted with to come in and train. And what I found is telling the story of my sister as a nurse opens up for me to have this conversation and provide some training that even me as at a doctorate level in psychology didn't really get, a substantial amount of training around suicide prevention. And then so I made the same assumption that probably other nurses, even some therapists, even, certainly psychiatrists don't have a lot of training in this. We're afraid of it, right? And we don't talk about it. So it's been allowed me to engage with people on the stage and educate them. So creating purpose out of it. And then, I had the opportunity this year. I spoke at the American Association of Suicidology conference and brought my niece on stage. We published a book together where she wrote a book chapter, and so she was able to come on stage, and she had like 40 people lined up so she could sign the book for them. So it was incredibly empowering for her to be able to take something that was so painful. She had written a paper for school, and I published it in a book. So that was an element to see that I was looking out for this little girl who embodies, the residuals of my sister, and for her to have a healing moment and help other people and feel loved and embraced when she shared such a powerful story in that book. So things like that, obviously Morning Glory has been part of my even healing journey. I'll come in and I talk way too much. And but it's but I'm better at it now. But bringing in my loved ones, who are struggling, and other people who are loss survivors to join, those would be the good grief. And and I think embracing that has allowed me to um, find my wife, and that's been beautiful. So learning how to not find attachment, but how to find connection. And I first had to find connection with myself so that I could show up more in the relationship. So every piece by piece has helped me move into that direction.
I want to also go back to Bridget's comment, guilt,
Mhm.
regret, shame, and embarrassment. The girl who found her mom dead, and the anger,
Yeah.
and her being pregnant. I I just also want to say that like there's probably not a lot of spaces and places to be able to share that story,
Hmm.
and like being able to be with other people who've had similar experiences, you start to see like, oh my God, there's so many people that have a similar story of finding their person and how they've overcome. And that's also why, when I started to see that in other groups, I was like, oh, I want to show this to the world. And then it became this. So, um, Bridget. Also, there was another
Yeah.
comment.
Taylor also found her mother at a young age too. And so those are traumatic, events that happen.
We have two girls that found their moms. That's you
Yeah.
know that's why we
And
do this. So you guys can find each other,
right.
find solace in each other. That's
Yeah. Well, it
wrap
looks like Taylor said she raised over 15,000, myself and 20,000 as a team, as Team Sabrina. That's great. That's great.
Taylor.
And so, being able to raise funds to create change, making sure that money is invested in something also that's meaningful is really, really important. Um, being able to tell your story and find somebody that's got your likeness. Vanessa showed up, she's come to our group too, and we have other folks who have sadly also lost a twin sibling. And so those dynamics become a little bit different. And I've learned so much from other daughters, other sons, um, and certainly other siblings, and certainly dating relationships about all of that, what that means. So all of a sudden, the way in which I'm experiencing and understanding my own loss, it broadens. And so I found in the walks, which I loved going to, but sometimes they felt isolated, right? Like we're walking, but we're not talking. Um, and then once it's over, there's not the sense of the community. Um, and so I've had some great experiences at walks, but it sometimes felt incomplete. Um, and creating community. And if certainly if you've been on a team, you feel like, okay, yeah, I'm not by myself in this. But to sit down and talk about how you're feeling and actually have a different energy and feel the love. Sometimes it's the things that you do after the walk that make the most difference.
Yeah. I also want to read Misha's comment. Just took 2 months alone to face triggers and especially had to face my deepest guilt and patterns of self sabotage. That started when my brother and best friend took their lives. I was really surprised my shame was running my interactions with my boyfriend and needed to be alone to decipher between now and my residual self image from years before. Took me years and extreme therapy to finally face anger for them and stop just blaming myself.
Oh,
Yes, that is an
yeah.
amazing example of how when we understand our triggers, because sometimes we're just going through life and then somebody upsets us and then we're like, blah, and it creates all of this stuff and problems in the relationships with the people who are here and alive with us. Meanwhile, it's this person or these people who have passed away and have died in these traumatic ways that are now influencing our real life relationships. And this is also why I talk so much about like grief and doing the work, because it's like life is for the living. And we don't want the dead to take our lives from us. And it can be really confusing and really hard, but there is a way. There is a way.
Yeah. Oh, well said. And and our goal here too is to create this community and to help expedite the healing process. Because once you hit all the pitfalls, if you will, like how do you get prepared? And Aleksei mentions for the difference between not just doing therapy, which can be somewhat passive, which I think is definitely needed as a therapist, but moving forward, especially if it's new, especially if it's recent, and you're anticipating, wait a minute, the anniversary is coming up or the holiday is coming up, and I need something more to get me through this difficult time. And how do I navigate this? So if you're missing community, we want to open the doors, especially right now, to allow people to come in, get closer, get the help that they need, and move through this quickly, much quicker. Because I've heard, being in a therapist, working this, people say it was like, oh, well, people, it takes time and da, 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 but they're just like if you go to physical therapy and you have an injury, and if it's not healed properly, um, you're going to find yourself having a lot of aches and pains as years go on, right? You're going to have issues with mobility. But it takes you going to that physical therapy, doing the exercises at home, doing the work so you can get back and move and begin to run and get your mobility back, um, as opposed to finding another injury, right? And then if you run into another death and you haven't resolved that issue, now we're talking about compounding grief, and these diagnoses come up around complicated grief, complex PTSD and acute stress disorder and all this other kind of stuff, problems with sleeping, problems with maybe substance abuse because it's getting heavier and heavier. Because sadly, life's and stuff starts to compound. The relationship doesn't go the way that you want it to. And, there's another incident that comes up, right? Because all of us has been caught off guard by this, and then all of a sudden we're triggered by something else that happens, right? We hear about another suicide in the news, right? We hear about, a mass shooting or something that reminds us of this again, and we say, "Oh my gosh, here I am again." And so the goal here is to help shore up this loss survivor community and to strengthen one's resilience around this, to identify where you are and where are your pain points as you're walking, the blind spots, if you will, doing some of the shadow work, allowing this to add depth, the death to add depth to your persona and being able to get into it and then re-emerge with greater vision, greater love for yourself, with better determination. So if you're in a place of like, I'm not satisfied, right? Or I know that things feel like they're closing in. We want to invite people into this club, that consistently is all about supporting the survivor because again, this is not work you do on your own. And even as a PhD, and you see all the letters on my name, right? I'm a human being first. And by doing the work and becoming more intentional about it and looking at doing the good grief, if you will, making my mourning glorious has allowed me to transcend and do much more impactful work. Um, from stuff like EMDR, I've done EIT, but the group support, the purpose of it, the intention, the focus of it is yielding results in my life that I haven't seen, that I probably worked for like 10 years trying to figure it out. Um, so, we want to invite you into this club. There's power in these numbers. Your story has meaning because the grief is a symbol of love and connection. Um, so anyways, I just want everybody to be clear on what the purpose of this is that if you're feeling that stuckness, that pain in your body, it comes up, you notice it, that nudge, reach out for help. Don't just sink in and ignore it. It's the first signal that you're loving yourself is paying attention when something hurts, right? And so when something hurts, we need to immediately pay attention to it. It's the one thing that I would say that our loved ones didn't do is they didn't pay attention to the emotional hurt and love themselves enough to know that it was time to ask for help. And so as I begin to do that, I begin to acknowledge that this is what I would want my sister to do when she was in pain, is to reach out for help. And so, um, none of us asked to be a part of this club, but it became necessary. And the
Yeah.
world is simply not offering it in a way that I think gives this heart and intention and safe space, because you can't do the work. Even EMDR, it takes you to be in a safe space to be able to open up and to feel what you're feeling and repurpose your thoughts, come back in with those positive cognitions, and more importantly, design for you a clearer purpose, clearer intention, so that you can be more full and complete, if you will. So we believe that grief can be healed. It's not a just just, oh, I got to be like this forever
Forever.
and ever. Like, no, like, and so if you can align with that, um, we invite you to come even closer.
Yeah. So when I was designing the sort of like language around Morning Glory, I was like grief warriors. And then I was like, oh, it's kind of like war. And then I was like, no, this is a war. And we gotta fight for ourselves. And like I want us to be like this battle line, battle line of people that can go out and not necessarily that you have to do like public speaking or be necessarily even public with your story, but that in the case that somebody says something annoying or dumb, which they likely will, you can protect yourself. You can advocate for yourself. And that's because you have all of these amazing tools in your toolbox. And so, yeah, we're grief warriors. You guys are welcome in. So it's been such an incredible journey, and getting to see people grow at a very like fast rate in this type of environment versus others that I've seen, it's been like the most beautiful thing ever. Because basically we've taken all of our knowledge and information that we've garnered over all of these years of like studying grief and understanding it and put it all together so that we can move through this quickly, that it
Mhm.
doesn't have to take 8, 10, 12 years to like get to be in an okay place because you've kind of forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. And you probably heard this phrase, "Oh, time heals all wounds." Not true. And
Not
so time doesn't heal wounds. It creates scars. And so it's time by itself doesn't get this done. It actually takes the real work. And the work is uncomfortable, but it can't be done until you feel safe. And
Yeah.
so finding that safe space to be able to do it is so important, right? And so it's just being out in the world trying to figure it on your own. There's not a lot of safe spaces with the communities that don't understand what's going on, being hit with those odd questions. And so you're constantly on guard, as you kind of talk about a warrior. So if you want to have more shields, you want to have more defense for yourself, you want to be able to protect yourself, and you don't want to do this by yourself, right? So think about, getting a personal trainer. If you're really trying to strengthen yourself in an area where you know you've had injury, you get that coach, you get somebody to come alongside with you and to help you figure out how to navigate. And like I said, and sometimes hold you up. And the whole group begins to do that. Um, and so you don't have to do this kind of stuff in isolation. So again, I thank you so much for the people that are here, the people that you lost, they're still with you. And so we want to honor them. And this is the thing that you can do because there's still a connection for them that's meaningful, however they are wired into you, to be able to shift that trajectory. You don't have to wait 10, 15 years.
No, don't do it.
Yeah, you don't
Uh,
have to wait 3 years, quite
yeah,
frankly.
don't do.
So,
Um,
yeah,
I do feel sometimes that suicide loss survivors feel like honoring our loved one is being sad. Like if we're feeling happy and we're moving on with our lives, then maybe we're kind of like bad because our person obviously was like struggling so much that they didn't want to be here. And then all of a sudden we start feeling that way. And you know, Dr. Marlon kind of mentioned this earlier. That's probably why suicide loss survivors have a 50% chance higher of considering suicide themselves. And that's a scary number, but like it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Right. And that's the reason, part of the reason why. And, um, it's, getting into kind of protective factors, I will say that because we need to talk about that as it relates to suicide loss survivors, is looking at what's going to help us. And one of the key elements that I teach on is this element called stay. Like what makes you stay here, stay alive. And Morning Glory does all five of those elements in a very unique way. Number one, your sobriety. And Aleksei mentioned this too. Like that's going to help you stay because we know when we are sober and sober minded, we're going to have clarity and we're going to stay here. I know so many people who have gotten drunk and become suicidal or intoxicated and are suicidal, right? So sobriety of mind helps you to stay. Your spirituality, right? Having connectedness to higher power, right? Whatever that is, God, universe, spirit, togetherness. So the T stands for togetherness. Having a community helps you stay when you feel like you're a part of something. And if you're a loss survivor, somehow it pushes you out on the margins, right? So togetherness helps you stay here. And that's why suicide loss survivors risk goes up is because you all of a sudden become marginalized and you have an example of someone that you're close to who have taken their life as if they didn't belong, and they really did. Attachment is the A, feeling connected to somebody specifically. It could be even a pet. Like I'm here because of I can't leave this other person, right? And the other one is A, the other A is access to help, right? So when we have easy access to help, will stay. So stay is not spelled STAY in this acronym. It's SSTAA. Sobriety, spirituality, togetherness, access to help, right? And attachment. So we want you to stay. We want you to stay here and help build up those things that we know that are true protective factors that help you bounce, not just back to where you were, but forward. And that's the idea of good grief. It is now loving yourself to not just transform the tragedy. And you read books about post-traumatic growth. Well, this is what we're talking about. This is advancing your growth, and it's not something that you do in a vacuum because this was a tragic event that had to do with who you were connected to. So it's about reconnecting with the right people, the right community that's going to compel you to go forward and finding purpose out of this pain and creating a shift that works generationally for you. No matter how recent it was or know how far it was, you can create a shift to take yourself to the next level. So it's by compounding all the things that you're doing to double down on the good grief, and those waves, all of a sudden, it doesn't bother me anymore. There was a time that I couldn't even hear the word suicide without weeping, right? And I was trying to do a job as a crisis worker, and I couldn't read past the word suicide on a note, right? And I'm sitting there by myself, like, who am I going to talk to about this, right? I can't do my job, right? And so Morning Glory creates a space for those shifts in a safe community where you might lack one, to compel you forward, not to sit into the victimization of it, but to make that shift, but to care and love you enough to know that that is also an important place to allow you to shift. We just don't want you to get swallowed up by it and feel like it needs to dictate the rest of your life. So we've had older members join, right, who have not talked about this stuff for 20 years and show up and like, oh my gosh, I've done this for 1 week. And all of a sudden, I feel like I've done more than I've ever done in the last 20 years. So that's where time doesn't heal. It's what you do with that time that creates the shift, right? And the more intentional you become about that, the greater your growth becomes. And that happens at a spiritual level for you, and it happens at an emotional level for you. It starts to happen at relationship level for you, right? So we want to invite you in to create that shift. If you're not satisfied with where you're at, or you're concerned about those milestones, I want to encourage you to reach out. And I know Aleksei has got some limited time to connect with you, maybe individually, for those who want to find out a little bit more about what they can do and customize this more fully for you. Um, this is all about a healing journey. Healing is not just a catchphrase. Um, and it's a growth process, but healing can happen, and you can get back to living and actually thriving again. You didn't ask for this thing to happen. So anyways, I'm obviously very passionate about this, and I have a lived experience, lived expertise, and I've seen the value. And so I want to champion to bring other people into this space, who want to participate in, I want to do more. And so if you want more, put it in the chat. Say, hey, I want to go further in my healing. Put that in. Like, what's the pain point?
We've got a new person that joined us too. Hi,
Oh,
Rox.
beautiful. Roxanne, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for coming in.
And for the win.
Birds. You don't mind just type in like who you lost, if it was a mother, your father, son, whoever. Just give us a name. We want to hear everybody, just to know we lost survivors in here. And yeah. List my mama. What's your mama's name? Give us her name too. We want to know mama's name. Let's call out our loved ones here. List my mama. Yeah. See, we've got some daughters in here today.
Yeah,
Through
lots of daughters.
Sabrina Jones.
Sabrina Jones. They say that nobody's dead. No, you're never dead as long as people keep saying your name, which I actually do believe that to be true.
Yeah. Thank you, Taylor. Sabrina Jones. Yes.
Yeah. So if we keep speaking their names, they get to live on through us, and through us, like, yeah, just like Dr. Marlon said, like, we didn't ask for this. We didn't ask to become a part of this crew, but if we're gonna have to deal with it, we may as well deal with it together and band together.
Yeah. Yeah. This doesn't have to define the rest of your life. And I think sometimes we get stuck in that element. Lost my brother Terry in 2015. Two for Eric and William. Beautiful. Thank you for adding their names too.
Oh,
Bless you, Terry.
oh,
So tough, and so again, that compounding, and it re-triggers, when we have other suicide loss that happens around us or close by us. So as you do this work, and because us surviving is building up a better defense, and resilience is about rebounding quicker, right, from it, of like knowing how to process. Oh, I know exactly what this is, how to care and love for oneself. Oh, and I know I'm not supposed to be alone for this. So let me feel this energy and let me make this shift. And that's the growth that we want to create ultimately. And so you really do need somebody who understands where you've been. Um, and that's the benefit of a morning glory club. So again, thank you, Aleksei, for just creating it, talking about turning pain into purpose. Like this is next level.
Yeah, I remember one time I was dating this guy, and we were kind of going back and forth on something that wasn't a big deal, but he was like, "You're on your own, not my problem." And I was so deeply triggered by this. And I took a moment and I went and I cried by myself. And I realized that hearing him say that made me feel like he was abandoning me in the same way that I felt abandoned by my dad. And because I had enough awareness to understand what was actually like happening in my body, I was able to process it and understand it, and then not turn that into this bigger blow up fight with me and this guy, because it was more about me dealing with my own abandonment, and also maybe that he wasn't the right partner, and being able to see that though instead of getting dragged into some drama. And so that, that was another moment where I was like, oh, the work works. Like, I know why I'm feeling this way right now. This is bigger than this argument, but also very insightful. Um, so yeah, I can't speak enough about being able to understand our triggers. And like, the word trigger is not the best word, I don't think, but like ultimately we are responsible for our own triggers. And that part kind of sucks because it's like, I didn't ask for this. But at the end of the day, we kind of are. If other people are triggering us, then that means that it's our job to get to the bottom of it, dig in there, maybe option into being triggered in a safe environment where we can analyze it and understand it, so that when it happens in the real world, we can reprogram it for ourselves.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, I think it makes a life a lot less like dramatic, and like things are happening to you and more like things are happening for you. And I love being able to reprogram things as they sort of like come up. I spend a lot of my time and energy thinking about like the grieving process and what it means, and how to transform it into what I described earlier as this sort of like beautiful love story with the self.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I see Taylor put in there saying like using the word activations instead of triggers. Yeah, I agree. I sometimes I'll say you feel threatened. Just think about it's an element of anxiety. It's an awareness that comes on. So it's an alert system. Like something triggers us, aka something activates us. What I don't like about triggers is that it's the notion that you can't do anything about it, right? It's like an automatic thing. So really, it's an awareness. So you have to understand, what is this bringing up for me? So and then being able to ground yourself through it, knowing that your body needs something in that moment. There's a sensory thing that's happening in our nervous system that's been alerted, right? It could be a smell, it could be a similar look, it could just be a song that comes on the radio, right? And so when you begin to invite the activations of your nervous system and learn how to calm yourself through those, that's when the healing begins. So you're not activated in the same way, right? But for you to sit and do nothing and to ignore them or to try to push them away, um, that's bad grief, right? Or it's like, oh yeah, every time I get triggered, I got to go smoke. I got to go do something unhealthy because you're trying to run away from it. You're trying to turn it off. No, we want to turn it on and lean into it. What are you saying to it? Right? That's the mastery around this. So through the process of the morning glory is about helping you face and lean into it carefully as a companion, right? And helping you to normalize something that is very abnormal, that should not have ever happened, right? So, and creating that shift. So,
I I just do have to say that like my nervous system is better now than it's ever been in my entire life. And that in and of itself has to be the biggest win ever.
mhm,
I mean, Dr. Marlon knows I had almost debilitating anxiety, like to the point where like I felt like I was having like a light panic attack like for days on end. And learning how to calm myself and have all of these tools in my toolbox, um, and be able to learn them when I'm not necessarily in that place, so that when I was in that place, I know now where to go. Like, okay, you're feeling anxious. Okay, what do I need? Okay,
Mhm.
meditation, journaling, like a certain song, a walk, all of these things. And then there's more stuff like, learning how to control your thoughts too. Like thought control is so important. And he spoke about negative self-talk a lot before, and I have a lot of different techniques. One of them would be like every time you have a negative thought, you stop and you say the opposite. And it's so simple, but it can be really hard because sometimes your brain is just your brain controls you. But your brain is supposed to be used like a calculator. You pick it up, you use it, and then you put it down. Your brain isn't supposed to run the show 24/7. But when our nervous systems are a wreck, it gets really confusing and really hard. So learning how to control the body, calm the mind, all of these things combined together. And when you get into a daily practice of being able to calm your insides and calm your mind, it really, I can't speak to it enough, you guys. Like it really is life changing.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. No, and you're right. And that's part of that is that, we teaching about, you are not your brain, right? So recognizing that it is a computer system, if you will, that does things automatically out of convenience, out of familiarity, and how to shift that nervous system using your body, using your thoughts, which become the most powerful thing that you have, right? So
and not
that's,
and it's also our lost loved one is an example of what not to do. They certainly allowed the negative thoughts to take over. And as much as I honor and I look up to my dad and I love him so much and I do love him unconditionally, I also don't want to be like him.
hmm
I used to when I was little, but you know what I mean? And it gets really confusing. And I know there's a lot of people with parents on here. It's like there are examples. There, like
hmm
suicide can be like, oh, that's the way we solve problems in this family. No, we're not gonna be like we can take all the good, but we're definitely gonna leave the bad, and we're gonna do things completely differently in that regard. And negative self-talk is like the number one way to just like go down a negative spiral, and I don't want that for any of you guys.
yeah. No, that's beautiful. And thank you for your words, Taylor, as well. Like you had making that commitment to yourself, right? And writing a different story and taking the pain that you're not responsible for and shifting it and actually creating momentum to move yourself into a different direction, right? And that's what we want to do is to move in that direction and
And then it
knowing.
gets easier. It
Mhm,
does get easier. Like
mhm,
once you start to wrangle your thoughts in your mind, like your mind will start to produce more positive thoughts. It's just starting that train. And that's something you guys could start like tonight. Like whenever you have a negative thought, I also have this thing. It's like a rubber band trick. You can snap the rubber band when you have a negative thought, reprogram it into something positive. And that's a super simple, easy technique. One other one is, what will my next thought be? Everybody try this. I'm going to ask you a question.
okay.
What will your next thought be? Oh, it was a while. The idea in this exercise isn't the thought. It's the space between when I ask the question and having the thought. And that is presence. And asking yourself that question, I don't know, you could ask yourself that question 30 times a day. You'll start to notice that space getting wider and wider and wider. And then you can start living in the in betweens and then calling upon your brain and using it like a calculator when you're ready to use your brain again and not have your brain use you.
Yeah. 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 It lets you know that you do have that locus of control ultimately to shift that narrative. And it shifts your perspective, right? It's taking agency over it essentially. And so, those are really the keys. And so we want to challenge ourselves to grow into this space after we've had this traumatic event of suicide loss and give you all the tools that are necessary for the individual you, your nervous system, to having that togetherness, for the group support that you have, and consistency, right? Until you're moving more freely and noticing things and even embracing what you would call not so much negative thoughts, but negative emotions, sadness, grief, guilt. All of those are normal parts of life, okay? But they don't necessarily, and I'll say your feelings are valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are true. Your feelings are valid, but doesn't necessarily mean that they are true, right? We start believing a negative feeling, right, as though it is true into the way that we think. So stopping and being like, what do I want to believe about this? I want to believe that I am good enough, right? That this is not my fault, right? That I have nothing to be ashamed of, right? That I'm worthy of love, right? How true is that for you today in this moment? That you are beautiful, that you deserve to be loved. It's okay for you to be angry. It's okay to forgive your loved one. It's okay for you to forgive yourself. It's okay for you to ask for help. It's okay for you to set boundaries. It's okay for you to say no. Yeah. It's okay for you to choose yourself. It's okay for you to take a break and rest. It's
Yeah, rest
necessary.
is super important.
And so as you lean into what is more true about who you are and what you're created to be, that you are created to grow, right? And you're not responsible for what had happened to you,
Mm.
right? But you are responsible for your growth and for choosing the next thought and the next step and how you love and connect. So again, taking yourself higher, using the gravity of the pain and shifting it into something that is great and beautiful and making it a gift, making it a purpose, making it intentional while still holding on to the love and the glory that's really within you, right? These are not things that we do by ourselves, right? And so as we've all entered into this community that we didn't want to be a part of, know that there's greater power in that collective, right? And that people need to know about you and your suffering, and it deserves to be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like, I realized there were so
Mhm.
many years that I was so focused on my dad's suicide and this trauma and this event that's happened in my family and how it tore my family apart. And all this time like went by and I realized that I had forgotten about the amazing life that he lived.
There you
I'd
go.
forgotten about, getting bedtime stories as a little
Mhm.
girl.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh my God. I'm just obsessed with Jeremy's death. What about all
The
of the
life.
things that he taught me? What
There
about
you
like celebrating the love that we had?" It
Mhm.
became shrouded in like all this darkness and sadness and like pain. And so now I get the opportunity to actually celebrate his life. And yes, his suicide was kind of the birthing place for me to be able to do that here with you guys. But he's so much more than just a guy who killed himself at 63. He
Mhm.
was my dad,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
love him still, even with
Yeah.
everything that has happened in the wake of that.
Yay.
Yay.
It's so beautiful. I mean, that's the important part of all of this is that we focus in on the love and the story and the life of the person that we lost, not their death, not to let that overshadow, but that we continue on, right, to represent their life, not their death, right? And so we will extend beyond. And I always believe that I've picked up the purpose that my sister left behind, and I've added it to my own, right, to champion forward the life that was left incomplete, right, and honor her life um, that just ended in sadness and pain. So I know we're coming in, and I just want to thank everybody first and foremost. I'll
Yeah.
say that. Thank you
Thank you
so much for
guys.
staying with us for all of this time and listening to our stories and sharing your own with us. Um,
Thank you for your vulnerability because it truly, truly, truly does take courage to be vulnerable and all
mm,
of your beautiful comments and sharing your stories. They're incredible stories, as sad as they are. I mean, goodness gracious, you've all been through so much, and we're so grateful to have been able to share this space with you. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Oh, Roxanne, no worries. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to share before we kind of wrap it up? Roxanne, how did you hear about this?
I'm a friend of Marlon's and I saw it on Facebook and he knows my story.
I
And
sure do. I didn't recognize you over there, Roxanne.
Hi, Roxanne.
how could you not recognize me?
I
Yeah.
know you're sitting back over there.
I'm home in a
It's
messy
the
bun.
it's the glasses. It's the glasses.
There I am.
There you go. I see you now. Oh, cool. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, I had heard about, I mean, I saw it on Facebook about a month ago or whatever, and I thought it would be interesting. I mean, mine is distant, but I just feel like I need to do some more work around it. So
Yeah. Thanks for Roxanne. Good seeing you.
you too.
We'll grab another coffee soon.
Yeah, we will.
That's right. Thanks for jumping on.
The
Right.
way that we always and Dr. Marlon, do you have anything else you want to share before I hop into gratitudes?
No, absolutely. I want to be mindful of time. I think Taylor's asking about getting more information too. So we can follow up with her, but absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Taylor, for sure. And Roxanne, did you go in through WAP? So I have like your info.
I tried that. That was
Did-
confusing to me, but then I saw the Zoom link on there, so I just clicked on it really quick.
Okay. Can you drop like your phone number and email in there? Because I think you're the only person whose contact I don't have.
Okay,
I
I'll
can,
put it.
and I can send it to you. I have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to just do that, Marlon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do
Sure.
that. I'll send it to you for sure.
Bridget, thank you so much for being here. Oh, Bridget left. Okay. Okay, so we always end group meetings, and this is what I've been doing from the very beginning. I always wanted to end the groups like on a high note, because gratitude is where it's at. When we are really in a state of gratitude, it beats all other feelings. So it's a great reminder that we can get back to gratitude even in the wake of everything that's happened to us. So we say something that we're grateful for, the reason why, and say thank you 3 times and feel as grateful as we can when we say thank you. So I don't know if you guys feel comfortable, like I'll stop this recording now because we don't need this, but